Happy Friday from Story and Song. Now you may remember last Friday, after I read from The Grapes of Wrath, I shared with you a letter that Steinbeck wrote to his son, and all about love. But we're going to be spending this afternoon back with the same book, but with a lot of different people. Now, when I was rehearsing last night, I looked more carefully at the book. Now, it is Letters of Note, an eclectic collection of correspondence deserving of a wider audience, compiled by Sean Usser. And I pointed out how wonderfully the book design evolved from a pen down through lines of gold and lines of turquoise. But what I asked you to do, I actually did myself. I looked more carefully at the book, and I was shocked to see something. Publishing is a whole process. This was published thanks to subscribers, and they actually list them in the back of the book. It's a huge small print list, and it was originally published in the United Kingdom thanks to this list of people. It is totally supported by the subscribers, and this way authors write what they want to write. Readers pay for what they wish to read, and it's very interesting. In the 18th and 19th centuries this was done. I know everybody's heard of Audubon. Well, Audubon's birds and the wild animals of North America were all done on a subscription basis to fund the initial printing. That was the path this book took, which I thought was really quite interesting. This is something, I'm not going to read the whole letter, but I'm going to ask Connor to show something that I think is interesting in it. Eisenhower visited England shortly after Queen Elizabeth came to the throne, and they apparently had a wonderful time at Balmoral, and Mamie was there, and eventually Queen Elizabeth wrote a letter. Well, how many times? Have you ever seen her handwriting? I haven't. In the letter, which included a recipe for 16 people eating scones, which she gave to President Eisenhower to use in the White House, was this letter with her on the official stationery and also with her signature in it. This book has so many similar treasures. Now, let me continue. I love this. Oftentimes there are photographs or pictures. Look at the alphabet soup that's next to this. There was a gentleman that, don't feel bad, nobody's really heard of him, Robert Pirosh wrote. He was a copywriter in New York and wrote commercials and ad copy. And he'd had it about up to here with that, and decided he was taking a year off in Europe, and then he'd solve his issues and find something he really wanted to do. Guess what he wanted to do? He wanted to write film scripts. And nobody knew who he was. So he wrote a cover letter, and this was it. And at the end of it, I'm going to ask you a question. He just blanketed, when he got back from Europe, with no job, no money, no nothing, blanketed these people in Hollywood with the heads of the studio, with this letter. Dear sir, I like words. I like fat, buttery words, such as ooze, turpitude, glutinous, toady. I like solemn, angular, creaky words, such as straight-laced, cantankerous, pecunious, valedictory. I like spurious, black is white words, such as mortician, liquidate, tonsorial, demi-monde. I like suave V words. Now, words such as Svengali, svelte, bravura, verve. I like crunchy, brittle, crackly words such as splinter, grapple, jostle, crusty. I like sullen, crabbed, scowling words such as skulk, glower, scabby, churl. I like, oh, heavens my gracious lenses sake, words such as tricksy, tucker, genteel, horrid. I like elegant, flowery words such as estivate, peregrinate, Elysium, halcyon. I like wormy, squirmy, mealy words such as crawl, blubber, squeal, drip. I like sniggly, chuckling words such as cowlick, gurgle, bubble, and burp. I like the word screenwriter better than copywriter. So I decided to quit my job in a New York advertising agency and to try my luck in Hollywood. But before taking the plunge, I went to Europe for a year to study contemplation, and horsing around. I have just returned, and I still like words. May I have a few with you? Now, if you've got a cover letter like that, would you not interview this guy? And the good news is, this is back in 1934. The head of MGM actually gave him a job, or didn't give him. He earned with his letter and his attitude a job writing scripts. Oh, this is one of my ubiquitous favorites. I've heard this expression before. I've used it, but I never really knew the whole story. You've heard it. Yes, Virginia, there is a Santa Claus. But do you know the whole story? It started with a letter. This little girl, and at the end of it I'm going to show you a picture of her, to the editor of The Sun, which is a now defunct New York newspaper. She wrote this letter. Dear editor, and this was in 1897, I am 8 years old. Some of my little friends say there is no Santa Claus. Papa says, if you see it in the sun, it's so. Oh, please, tell me the truth. Is there a Santa Claus? Virginia O'Hanlon, 115 West 95th Street. The editor wrote a letter back to her. Virginia, your little friends are wrong. They have been affected by the skepticism of a skeptical age. They do not believe except they see. They think that anything can be which is not comprehensible by their little minds. All minds, Virginia, whether they be men's or children's, are little. In this great universe of ours, man is a mere insect, an ant, and his intellect, as compared with the boundless world about him, as measured by the intelligent, capable of grasping the whole truth of knowledge. Yes, Virginia, there is a Santa Claus. He exists as certainly as love and generosity and devotion exist. And you know that they abound and give to your life its highest beauty and joy. Alas, How dreary would be the world if there were no Santa Claus. It would be as dreary as if there were no Virginias. There would be no childlike faith then, no poetry, no romance to make tolerable this existence. We should have no enjoyment, except in sense and sight. The eternal light with which childhood fills the world would be extinguished. Not to believe in Santa Claus. Well, you might just as well not believe in fairies. You might get your papa to hire men to watch in all the chimneys on Christmas Eve to catch Santa Claus. But even if they did not see Santa Claus coming down, what would that prove? Nobody sees Santa Claus. But that is no sign that there is no Santa Claus. The most real things in the world are those that neither children nor men can see. Did you ever see fairies dancing on the lawn? Well, of course not. But that's no proof that they are not there. Nobody conceive or imagine all the wonders there are unseen and unseeable in the world. You may tear apart the baby's rattle to see what makes the noise inside, but there is a veil covering the unseen world which not the strongest man, nor even the united strength of all the strongest men that ever lived, could tear apart. Only faith, fancy, poetry, love, romance can push aside that curtain and view and picture the supernatural beauty and glory beyond. Is it all real? Virginia, in all this world, there is nothing else real and abiding. No, Santa Claus. Thank God he lives, and he lives forever. 1,000 years from now, Virginia, nay, 10 times 10,000 years from now, he will continue to make glad the heart of childhood. Want to know what Virginia looks like? Walk with me through the book. There's a picture of her from 1897. Now, anytime I use that expression, yes, Virginia, there is a Santa Claus, I will make it with knowledge as opposed to the way I used to make it. Oh, totally one of my favorite letters. Let me just give you the tip of the iceberg. Lieutenant Colonel A.D. Wintle. What a name. Well, what a person. In World War II, he was injured, sent into the hospital, wanted to get out. He was tired of being in the hospital, so he grabbed a nurse's uniform and was almost successful in escaping so he could get back to his unit. You know what gave him away? He left his monocle on. People figured out who he was. This man actually represented himself in a court case. You've heard that expression, a man who represents himself as a bad client, as a fool. Well, guess what? He won. This man did extraordinary, wild and woolly things. To the editor of the Times, this is the London Times, he wrote, "Sir, I have just written you a long letter. On reading it over, I've thrown it in the waste paper basket. Hoping this will meet with your approval, I am, sir, your obedient servant, Lieutenant Colonel A.D. Wintle." That letter is still in the archives of the London Times. They really liked that letter, apparently. Oh, and this is fascinating. A letter has to be written on paper, doesn't it? Well, this is a story I knew just a little bit about, but not a lot. Remember President John F. Kennedy, PT 109, his conveyance was hit by a Japanese war vessel, warship, and the men, there were 11 of them in total, escaped to the Solomon Islands. Well, apparently you haven't lived if you haven't experienced the isolation that could occur in those islands. There were some natives there. There was 3 guesses, no paper. They had been in the water. There were no pencils, no nothing to write. How was he going to communicate? No radio. This artifact actually existed on the president's desk. I'd heard about it, but I didn't know the story. And I'm going to actually show you a picture of it. He took a coconut that had fallen from a tree and literally scratched with a knife a message. And 2 of the Solomon Island natives took it to his commanders so that they communicated with him as to where Kennedy and his men were. Native knows position. He can pilot. 11 alive. Need small boat. Kennedy. He encased it in plastic, used it as a paperweight on the president's desk in Washington, D.C. Now, isn't that a letter worth receiving? It's enough to make me want to think my email habit. Another brief one from my best friend, Benjamin Franklin. You've heard the expression paying it forward, where you do something and you don't exactly get back what you gave, but you give something that will keep giving. Well, as many of you are aware, Benjamin Franklin was our ambassador in France and did many things, including his founding father approach. He wrote a letter to a man named Benjamin Webb. Dear Sir, I received yours of the 15th instant, and the memorial it enclosed. The account they give of your situation grieves me. I send you herewith a bill for 10 louis d'or, that's French money. I do not pretend to give such a sum. I only lend it to you. When you shall return to your country with a good character, you cannot fail of getting into some business that will in time enable you to pay off all your debts. In that case, when you meet with another honest man in similar distress, you must pay me by lending this sum to him, enjoining him to discharge the debt by like operation, when he shall be able, and shall meet with another opportunity. I hope it may thus go through many hands before it meets with a knave that will stop its progress. This is a trick of mine for doing a deal of good with a little money. Oh, I am not rich enough to afford much in good works, and so am obliged to be cunning and make the most of a little. With best wishes for the success of your memorial and your future prosperity, I am, dear sir, your most obedient servant, B. Franklin. We can be proud to be part of a country with the founding father of that ilk. gets confusing because I went forward and backwards and every which way but loose on this. I'm going to read you something that I thought I wasn't going to read, but the more I read it, the more wonderful I really thought it was. This is by Richard Feynman, and it's a letter to his wife, Arlene Feynman. And it is titled, and I'll show you a picture of him, I love my wife. My wife is dead. October 17th, 1946. Darlene, I adore you, sweetheart. I know how much you like to hear that. But I don't only write it because you like it. I write it because it makes me warm all over inside to write to you. It is such a terribly long time since I last wrote to you. Almost 2 years, but I know you'll excuse me because you understand how I am. Stubborn and realistic. And I thought there was no sense to writing. But now, I know, my darling wife, that it is right to do what I have delayed in doing, and that I have done so much in the past. I want to tell you, I love you. I want to love you. I will always love you. I find it hard to understand in my mind what it means to love you after you are dead, but I still want to comfort and take care of you. And I want you to love me and care for me. I want to have problems to discuss with you. I want to do little projects with you. I never thought until just now that we can do that. What we should do. We started to learn to make clothes together, or learn Chinese, or getting a movie projector. Can't I do something now? No. I am alone without you, and you were the idea woman and general instigator of all our wild adventures. When you were sick, you worried because you could not give me something that you wanted to and thought I needed. You needn't have worried. Just as I told you then, there was no real need because I loved you in so many ways, so much. And now, it is clearly even more true that you can give me nothing now. Yet I love you so that you stand in my way of loving anyone else. But I want you to stand there. You, dead, are so much better than anyone else alive. I know you will assure me that I'm foolish and that you want me to have full happiness and don't want to be in my way. I'll bet you are surprised that I don't even have a girlfriend. Except you, sweetheart, after 2 years. But you can't help it, darling, and nor can I. I don't understand it, for I have met many girls and very nice ones, and I don't want to remain alone, but in 2 or 3 meetings, they all seem ashes. You only are left to me. You are real. Oh, my darling wife, I do adore you. I love my wife. My wife is dead. Rich. P.S. Please excuse my not mailing this, but I don't know your new address. somebody. That one got to me. Now, I'm not about to leave you on a downer. But first I've got to do something. Turn your head away. That's why I didn't want to read this letter originally. It affects me. You know, my first job after I graduated from NYU was teaching in a private school. Oh God, my kids could be crazy. But if they were good, I rewarded them at the end of the day with, and this will shock you, reading aloud from a book. And we chose together Charlotte's Web. And we just about gotten to the end of it. And we'd had an arduous day, and the kids pushed their desks back and got in kind of a semicircle around me, and I propped up against the desk and started reading. Oh my goodness. The bell rang. It was the end of the day. And I had been teaching them about indoor voices, outdoor voices. I said, well, should we just stop and I'll pick this up tomorrow or another day? In a very outside voice at the end of school, in unison, they said, no! So I understood what they meant. I kept reading. Time passed. I could see out of the corner of my eye in that long glass window the headmaster standing there. He was a Scotsman, rather dour, really. And he was looking in, and he was looking back behind him. And finally, I got to the end of the book. Well, I'm not going to spoil it for you, but oh, let me tell you, it's a tearjerker and a wonderful, wonderful story. I finished. I opened the door. The kids were out. Parents had been waiting in the hall. And guess what? The kids were all bawling. There were tears coming down their little cheeks. I remember John Jarvis said, what on earth did you do to those children? I didn't do it. E.B. White did it. Oh, well. Now, that little side story was done because I wanted to read a letter that E.B. White wrote to a Mr. Nadeau, who was having a rather pessimistic moment. And it goes, Dear Mr. Nadeau, as long as there is one upright man, as long as there is one compassionate woman, the contagion may spread, and the scene is not desolate. Hope is the thing that is left to us in a bad time. I shall get up Sunday morning and wind the clock as a contribution to order and steadfastness. Sailors have an expression about the weather. They say, the weather is a great buffer. I guess the same is true of our human society. Oh, things can look dark. Then a break shows in the clouds and all is changed. Sometimes, rather suddenly. It's quite obvious that the human race has made a queer mess of life on this planet. But as a people, we probably harbor seeds of goodness that have lain for a long time waiting to sprout when the conditions are right. Man's curiosity, his restlessness, his inventiveness, his ingenuity have led him into deep trouble. We can only hope that these same traits will enable him to claw his way out. Hang on to your hat. Hang on to your hope. And wind the clock, for tomorrow is another day. Oh, go exploring in this book. You're going to find treasures. Thank you so much, and I will see you on Wednesday